This video presentation is made possible by the SLO County Department of Education and the SLO Co-Arts Collaborative. For over a century, the Central Coast of California has been a haven for people from all walks of life. Pioneers, entrepreneurs, farmers, innovators, artists, dreamers. People escaping the city life to find beautiful landscapes, rich culture, seeking prosperity, and most importantly, joy. For a lot of us, we find joy in art, whether we're makers or just lucky enough to enjoy the art of others.
Hi, I'm Peter Henry Schroeder. I'm a local documentary filmmaker here in San Luis Obispo County. I invite you to come with me now as we actually get to go talk to some of these artists firsthand and learn about what makes them tick. What are some of the challenges they face, and how do they do this on a day-to-day basis? Where does their inspiration come from, and how do they actually find the joy in their art? What really gives them that creative juice?
My name's Sharon Lovejoy, and I'm an author and illustrator of books about gardening and nature and picture books and historical fiction, and I like to do artwork as well. That's my real passion, to reach children, to reach grown-ups, and to teach them something wonderful about our world, which is so magical. I was born in a town that no longer exists. I'm a fifth-generation Californian. I was born in Wilmar Rural. And when I give school talks and kids ask, where were you born? And I say, a town that no longer exists, they think I did something to it. I was kind of a ragtag tomboy when I was growing up. And I was in my grandmother's garden all the time, but I did love to draw, and they were really bad drawings. When I was in 8th grade, I produced my own newspaper, mimeograph, you know, the old mimeo machines. And I did cartoons and I wrote all the news pieces, and it was only probably 4 pages, but I did it all. So that was the beginning for me. That's why I think it's so important for kids to have art and programs in school and to get a chance to express their creativity and get that other side of their brain working. I almost didn't have a college experience because I had family problems, and my counselor at school told me I was not college material. And that kind of defeats you before you take a step. I didn't have anywhere to turn. I was at that era when a woman was married or a teacher or a secretary, and I wanted to do something different. I went to Santa Barbara City College, and they infused me with a belief in myself and what I could accomplish. They said, you know, you're a straight A student, choose a major. I took art classes, I did life drawing, and I did really well. And I hadn't really done really well in high school. In fact, it was pretty bad. This wonderful professor I had, he passed away, Charles Atkinson, and he called me up to his desk to talk to after class one day, and he said, why aren't you going to school full time? And I said, well, I'm not college material. And he went, Miss Lovejoy, you're getting straight A's, you know, you're college material. All you'd need is one person like that to believe in you. I went to San Diego State University. I graduated with distinction, but I don't quite know what that means. And I think of the kids who have that you can't do it attitude, and it breaks my heart because I suffered it. And I surmounted it. And it's an amazing feeling to climb out of that dark hole and to see the light. I was a mail girl at the phone company, and I was in college, and I was sorting mail, and a card came through of the Cambria Pines Lodge, and it said, Cambria Pines by the sea. And I took the postcard and I held it up to my chest and I said, Cambria Pines by the sea. I'm gonna live there someday. My first business was a bookstore in Santa Rosa, California. And I had rare books and all sorts of things that all fit into nature and art. And after that, I went to Shell Beach and started Harvest Country Store, and then Cambria. I started a business there in 1982, and it did really, really, really well. It was an herb and garden store, and so I was doing more of the same things and doing artwork and creating things. And it was a tough go because Highway 1 washed out. And my son and I lived on, you know, remember when Milkman could deliver milk and yogurt and eggs? If we hadn't had a wonderful milkman, I don't know what we would have eaten because we were hardly making any money, but it ended up being totally wonderful and successful. It was in every kind of magazine and newspaper, and for some reason it touched people's hearts because it was real. It was an authentic business with real heart. We taught classes, we had festivals. My husband, when he first met me, said, "How can you make a living doing this?" And then he found that he was working there and 13 employees were working there. It just got big. We bought property on Burton Drive from Angela Lansbury. She had a large, I think it was about a 1/4 acre lot downtown Cambria that she had bought for her brother-in-law Patrick, who had a business there. And when Patrick passed away, the first thing that happened was people wanted to develop it, knock down the old 100-year-old cottage and the barn. Jean, who was my plant nanny, said she heard over the back fence, this is Cambria, there are no secrets. She heard over the back fence they were going to knock down the old building on Burton Drive and the barn and build a 2-story shopping mall. And we wanted to keep that heart of Cambria alive. And I wrote Angela and I said, I want to have a public garden there, which we did. We had fabulous public gardens. I want to teach classes. I want to have a place for the community to gather, have poetry, we did all sorts of things there. And then one day I got a phone call. Manny Fleckman is Angela Lansbury's business manager, and he'd like to come up and meet you. And that's how that dream came true. For many years it was there. It's still there, it's just a different name now, but I had it for 20 or 22 years. And I could buy more than yogurt. I could feed my son. Well, dreams can come true. Sometimes we forget that. We say no, 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 and we should say yes, yes, yes. I was the president of the International Herb Growers and Marketers Association. I was giving a talk, and afterward, a really nice woman named Linda Ligon came up to me and said, "Sharon, have you ever considered writing a book?" And I said, well, I have been drawing a book for quite a while, and I've collected traditions, floral traditions and stories for 10 years, 15 years. And she said, well, I own a publishing house. Would you like to do a book? And I said, yes. So it came to me. I didn't go out looking for it. It was Interweave Press. They published it. It was called Sunflower Houses. It was my first book with my illustrations. And it sold out immediately, and it went back to print over and over and over. In fact, Linda told me that it was the first time, because they had things printed in America then, that every single person who worked at the print shop bought a copy. And that just made me so happy. And I started getting letters from people, and I have photos I can share with you of people's sunflower houses that they planted and played in, and it was just an incredible thing. And that started my publishing. And then I started writing for Country Living Gardener. First of all, I didn't want them to do an article on our house, but they said, look, you're living a dream and you can share it with people. You can reach millions of people. Jeff and I talked and decided that it would really help some people follow their dreams, however weird and ragtag they might be, then it would be okay. So they came, and it was the first time they'd ever really focused on a business like ours, and they did a lot of shots of the garden. And then the editor said to me, Sharon, I'm considering starting there was Hearst Publications, new Hearst magazine called Country Living Gardener. Would you like to be a columnist? She said, you could have a column called Heartsease and write whatever you want, and you can do the illustrations for it. And I thought, all right. And I did that the whole time the magazine existed. But like all good magazines, we're seeing a lot of them disappear, and it disappeared. Broke my heart, but it disappeared. But it still forged a lot of bonds for me everywhere, all over the world. It just was incredible. Because of the magazine, I got to design gardens for major landscape companies, EDA. I did the children's Cleveland Botanic Garden, I did Red Butte Botanic Garden, I did. I was chosen by Disney World to be their Great American Gardener, and they flew us to Disney World. And you know, that little shop in Cambria, it was like a miracle for me. It was pretty remarkable, and we did it on less than a shoestring. Jeff and I and our boys did all the work, all the work. It was a magnificent garden, and Angela Lansbury had her brother-in-law's funeral memorial service in her garden. She looked around and she said, "I feel like I'm in Britain. I feel like this garden's been here 100 years. So she was pretty pleased that what we did with the land we bought from her. And she donated a $1,200 teak bench with a plaque on it in her brother-in-law's memory. You know, she was pretty thrilled. It just was this magical jumping off point for me, you know. I mean, Shell Beach was good for me, but Cambria was magic. It was an incendiary device. Boom. It was wonderful. When I did one of my books for Workman, I developed it in a way that no other garden book had ever been developed. It was called Roots, Shoots, Buckets, and Boots. And I tried for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years to get the project through. I kept submitting pages, and they'd say, "No, you don't have it, but we'll know it when you do." And one morning I woke up and I thought, well, every day I go out on a discovery walk. I turn over rocks and I look at lizards and I sketch spiders, so I'll do a discovery walk for every chapter in the book. And they went, "That's it." This is Roots, Shoots, Buckets, and Boots. And I went through 42 different titles before they accepted this title. And on the last night at 2:30 in the morning, when Peter Workman had said to me, either come up with a good name or I'm naming it Pumpkin Junction, I got up in the middle of the night, I went downstairs, and I wrote down Roots, Shoots, Buckets, and Boots, and he loved it. And it's been a good title for me, so. That's me with my son Noah. There are over 1,000 illustrations in here. They're called spot illos. This is to teach children that they don't need to have a big garden. They can do things in buckets and boots and in small little growing areas. And that's because I started gardening in tomato cans and things like that. I started growing things in cans. So the thing that distinguishes this from other things, other books on gardening, I start with the top 20 plants for children, and I talk about them in an ethnobotanical term, how they were used by cultures, how they might have been musical instruments or foods or great for the bugs. So it's not in Native American culture. So I do all of that for the top 20 plants. I love growing things in boots and hats and things. And that's because I started gardening in tomato cans and things like that. So you could live on a boat and grow things. So I give them the ingredients as though it's a recipe card. It's always things that are free. You know, things that you can grow, things that you can pick, things that you can make from all those natural things. And I always say, don't use poisons, don't use herbicides, don't use fungicides, so that kids know that they can just go out into a garden and pick things and snack and sip. All the connections in a garden, bugs and just everything, the worms in the soil, what's underground. It's not just about what's blooming in the garden, but you know, how to plant things, how to grow things, what you're going to see, what's going to happen, what exciting things are going to be evolving. Who doesn't love a pizza, right? So this is my pizza patch garden. And I have activities, crafts and art and all sorts of things to do in the garden. Probably major difference is every chapter has a discovery walk, and it tells you what you can find when you go out during your morning walk in the garden, what's under the rocks, what's hiding in the blossom, how does a borage blossom taste, what's a lemon cucumber. You know, it has all this information. Here's the sunflower house. I did it in this one too. And this is the discovery walk for the sunflower house garden. I talk about a bug safari in here to tell you what things are growing in the garden. I don't know if you've ever seen when all that little kind of like frothy spit is on plants. So I'm introducing children to the spittle bug, the leaf hopper that causes that froth in the plants, and just sharing some secrets with them. And the life of a sunflower seed that sprouts, and the fact that goldfinches don't just like the seeds, they love to make salads out of the leaves. And over 1,000 illustrations, small ones. Only way I could get through that, because because I was living in Maine at the time, start at 5 in the morning, and it'd be dark, and I'd work until 5 or so at night, and it'd be dark again, and I'd sometimes would just be in my pajamas day and night because I had deadlines, and at that time you FedEx things, you didn't scan them, and we have to leave the island and drive to Augusta, Maine to get them in a FedEx to get to New York, because there'd be a staff there waiting to, twiddling their thumbs, waiting for my illos to come. I would do pre-sketches of everything so they'd know how the layout would go, but then they'd have to have the actual things to lay them in. And the art department at Workman, and I'm very loyal to Workman Publishing, they were very good to me. And they were all waiting for things to come in so they could be laid out. So, you felt extreme pressure, but I don't think with any other book that I ever felt that pressure, ever. I knew I had deadlines, and I knew there's a reason it's called a deadline. You know that too. And I knew that I had to meet my deadline or else. Camp Granny was really hard, and running out of night, trial and error. Running Out of Night was the historical fiction novel. It took me years and years and years, just as this one that I'm writing about Maine has taken me maybe 5 years, 6 years, I don't know, something like that. But you just it's like trying to make a beautiful patchwork quilt out of all these different pieces and having to stitch them together very nicely, beautifully, and making sure they go together. And that's what you do when you're doing a book like what I did for Root Shoots. Stitching together 1,000 pieces of different illos and making sure that the whole story was told in each chapter. So that was my toughest one. Working on a book about foxes, and I started out by doing these Post-its. That was my beginning. How you start out doing just little notes, and I do little sticky notes and try to lay out the way I think it might work. I've rewritten it probably 20 times, and I'm not kidding. These are all file folders for it, and my critique group helps me with it. And then I'm doing a dummy, and this is the dummy, and I haven't finished it, but it's to give an idea of the layout of the story. As I work, I like to keep my things out so I can look at them and compare them and make sure they all fit together, and that's what you see when you look around the studio. So this is how I get my layout going. I'm quite in love with the fox, as you can tell. And that's Fox and Duck in a family portrait. And this is Fox, Duck, and the ducklings. They're not done, they're only preliminary. I just came up with this. It's a bobcat that's coming up to kill the mallard, the female duck. So I haven't laid in color yet. But that's how it evolves. It evolves this way. I love this. This makes me happy. The way I judge things is if I stand there and I start to smile, then I know I'm hit my happy spot. If it makes me smile and laugh, I think, I don't need to do any more. I've got it just where I need it. You need to know when to stop too. This little book I did on the Today Show, and this is all the kind of oddball things that I do in the garden, but they're scientifically based. Once I went to Sweden and lectured, I found that all over the world, people have the same floral traditions, whether it's wishing on dandelions or making daisy chains. They're just similar traditions all over the world. And I loved learning that, and I love teaching about that too. This won the National Outdoor Book Award for Children's Literature, and this is based on our house in Maine. This is my bird sound and cricket sound clock that shows exactly when those things make noises. You can look at the face of a clock and judge it from that. But there's my little red house on a little green island, and I used strange colors instead of just traditional colors. I used rose and azure and violet and beige and just things that would tickle a child. And it's a rebus, which means that there's a picture for the word and it rhymes so that kids can pick it out and know on a little green island stands a little red house with a little orange cat and a little gray mouse. They point to the picture and they can read it. You know, you have to love research to do this. I love research, and when I wrote Running Out of Night, I was just over my head in research about pre-Civil War and slavery and friendship and the fauna and flora of Virginia. It was a black girl and a white girl, a friendship that had no boundaries. And it was an adventure. And one of the things that I said in that book was, you can't overcome violence with evil or evil with violence. These are some of the sketches. This was the big yellow eye looking through a knothole in the door. This actually made my grandson stand on the other side of the fence, and I photographed his eye up against the fence. This was Auntie's cabin. And this was in Lark's cabin where the rifle was kept. And I got sick at the end of writing that book, but the good thing is that I can take a bunch of the illos that I did when I'm doing school visits and show them to the kids, and the kids can then visualize everything. There's always something in what I see around me that spurs me on to write things. But I found I was writing something about the Holocaust and I had to stop. I couldn't do it. It was killing me. I had to stop. I try to do things that are positive, and I mean, I don't know about you, but I pick up a paper or a magazine and it's all bad news, and it's like somebody's putting a sack of sand on my body and my soul and crushing it into the ground. So I try to make things brighter. I'm not trying to be a Pollyanna, but our world has enough sorrow to go around it 50 times. I don't need to add to it. So I'm not going to write anything dark, and I'm not going to write anything violent, and I'm doing it from my perspective, and it's my choice, and I like being in charge of my life, and my choice is to head for the light instead of the dark. So because I'm sort of like this, listening to everything going on around me, and I write things down. This is one of my notebooks that I carry with me, and I put things in that are really inspirational. I might have a part of a Mary Oliver poem or a part of something I hear somebody saying. For instance, I heard a woman say, well, they're members of the upper nonchalant, and I had to write down upper nonchalant. I'll use that in something. You know, I just write everything down. John O'Donohue, poems that I love. There's just no end of inspiration all around us. You know, if you don't listen to people's conversations and you don't pay attention to them and you're only interested in yourself. One time we had a man at one of our critique groups, and somebody said, what do you read? Because you have to read. You always read for inspiration. You don't read to copy, you read to refill your reservoir. And he said, oh, I don't read, I'm a writer. And I thought, you're not a writer if you don't read. You know, if I hadn't read All the Light You Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, I'd be less of a person. If I didn't read Mary Oliver poetry, I'd be less of a person. I'd certainly be less of a creator, because all those things are just like a fresh spring coming into you and making you look at things in a different way. And I do a lot of Zoom classes all around the world, and I was teaching a class, and I was giving the analogy of reading a Mary Oliver poem that talked about a snake that jellied across the road. And I thought, that's perfect. Start using words in different ways. It jellied across the road. Can't you see that? I don't believe in rules. I believe you can mix every medium. And when I did textiles, I also did copper enameling with my textiles. I didn't follow any rules. I did antique beads. I did all sorts of things, because for me, breaking out of the confines has always been the fun part. And I never did well at an 8-to-5 job. And I never did well at rules, trying all these different things and trying different papers and collage and everything. And That's how I get where I want to go. I have to go on every side journey before I hit I know the target's right there, but I'm doing this. I'm going down every side road. Prismacolor pencils, greasy Prismacolor pencils, about 100 different colors. I love using micron pen. I love using Japanese pens and brushes. I love using acrylic, and I use gouache, and I use ink, and I use some very rare watercolors that are handmade for me. They are undervalued in museums and things like that. Watercolors are never as well received or as expensive as an oil painting. And I don't know if it's because it's a more transitory medium or what it is, but I love it. And it certainly is good for children's books, you know. This is an old set of, stamps so that I can do certain titles and things with them. I love those. This is our island in Maine. So wonderful. And there's our house. Oh, it's so neat. This is an old magazine article of me when I had my shop in Cambria, and it's in Japan. I'm telling you, that shop was written about all over the world. It was so amazing. I just, look at me as a Japanese gardener. And look at the Japanese printing. I love it. What are you willing to give to your profession? What are you willing to give to your art? I'm willing to give everything. I'll spend hours till my rear end is just petrified, till I can't move my neck, till my hands are stiff, just trying over and over and over to get it so that it makes me smile. And you have to be tenacious. I mean, it took me so many years. After my first publisher stopped doing the kind of books that I was doing, and I wanted to go with Peter Workman at Workman Publishing in New York City. And I worked year after year submitting writing and illustrations, and they weren't right. They just were not right. And that's the story I told you about getting up one morning and realizing I have to approach this gardening book in a totally different way, to do it my way. Somebody once said that wherever an author works, you see scratches on the wall from them holding on like a cat, you have to just hold on. And yeah, you have a lot of failures, you have a lot of rejections. I mean, I've been at it for so many years and I get rejections and I have failures, but I don't know how to do anything else. If it hadn't been for being tenacious, I would have just stopped after the first year. But finally, the phone call came and they said, oh, we think we'd love to do a book with Sharon. And it was like, really? Pinched me because I couldn't believe it. And it turned into 4 or 5 books, so that's wonderful. It was really wonderful. You can make dreams come true, but you have to stick with it.